The United States has imposed a 104% tariff on imports from China, marking the sharpest escalation yet in President Donald Trump's global trade offensive. China, meanwhile, has retaliated with 50% tariffs on U.S. goods, adding to their earlier 34% duties. This brings the total China tariffs on U.S. to 84%. Even as tariffs kick in, Washington is opening talks with key allies. Negotiations are being scheduled with South Korea and Japan, while Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni is expected in Washington next week. But the White House made one thing clear: no talks are planned with China. Administration officials say they will not prioritize engagement with Beijing. U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Green defended the tariff move, saying the strategy is bearing fruit. Take a listen.
The Chinese people's legitimate right to development is inalienable. China's sovereignty, security, and development interests are inviolable. We will continue to take firm and forceful measures to safeguard our legitimate rights and interests.
Some senators and economists alike remain skeptical of the broader economic challenges that the world might be getting pushed into.
Everybody, including China and the EU, are looking for new partners or looking for strengthening relationships with partners besides the US, since the US is becoming a more hostile trade partner. And of course, since China and the EU are two of the main biggest economies in the world, they look to each other for increasing their economic links.
As with any crisis, there's a silver lining, especially for countries facing lower tariffs and trade deficits with the United States. Countries like Brazil, Egypt, and Turkey, facing tariffs of around 10%, see export opportunities, especially in agriculture and textile. India, despite a 26% tariff, is exploring gains in manufacturing. Meanwhile, Vietnam and Bangladesh are absorbing steep blows with duties of 37% and 46%, respectively. Analysts warn the broader risk remains a tariff-led global slowdown, hurting both emerging markets and the United States itself. All right, is that all true, and where do we stand? For the latest, we are now being joined by our guest, Stuart S. Malaware, Distinguished Service Professor of Law and International Trade at George Mason University. Professor, thank you so much for joining us on WION.
Well,
Many believe that the global trade system right now is in disarray over President Trump's tariff proposals. However, President Trump doesn't seem to be backing down. Why do you think he's pushing harder and harder, notably when it comes to China?
Well, first, if you're asking me what he thinks, I'm not a mind reader. I don't really know. His worldview, I think this is what really answers your question, goes back to the 1930s, if not earlier. He rejects what the international system has developed, has evolved since 1945. And his worldview simply is a very nationalistic, unilateral, protectionist view. So as to your question as to China, I'm not sure what his reasons are, but I think he's playing what I would call the China card. There is a certain domestic feeling in the United States, blame everything on China, and that's precisely what he's doing. By the way, I would say this is the same thing he did vis-a-vis Japan in the 1980s when he was still in the private real estate investment world in New York City.
And when it comes to China, some analysts believe that China ultimately can't push back for a very long time, considering the fact that it's an export economy at the end of the day. Do you agree with that? And do you think that any side will blink anytime soon?
Well, as far as China is concerned, my sense is that China is a very large economy. We know this, and it's a very large export country. I think it probably can stand for a very long time in exporting its products to other countries. Now, if your question is as to can President Trump withstand this trade war for a long time with China, my sense is if you look at his practice over the years in dealing in the private sector, publicly, he talks tough, but in fact, somewhere along the line, there's always a threat, but then there's always a compromise. So I suspect if history tells you anything, you'll have some sort of compromise between the U.S., China, as well as the United States and other countries in the world. But China is the main target right now. By the way, I would say India is not off the hook. He has spoken very, tough language over the years concerning India's policies, but right now his focus is on China.
Hello? Hello? Professor, I do apologize for that interruption. My final question is regarding the stock market. Many are concerned, of course, about what's happening. But as a former businessman and perhaps a current businessman, do you think President Trump will ultimately change some of his policies when it comes to these tariffs because of what he's seeing on Wall Street?
Well, again, I'm not a mind reader for President Trump, but let me say, personally, I don't think it's going to make a difference to President Trump. He hasn't changed his policies the last 4 or 5 days, and the stock market continues to fall. I think what's going to make him change his mind in the future is when he confronts other countries who are standing up for not only their own national interests, but also for the interests of the international community. Look, global trade since World War II has been based on a rules-based international system, utilizing the WTO among other institutions. That system has been thrown into, if you like, the dustbin of history by President Trump. I don't think that's sustainable. I think in the long run, the system and other countries are going to force a reemergence of a rules-based system. And back to frankly, the great, I would say, prosperity that has rained down on the international system since 1945. To answer your question very specifically, I don't think the stock market is going to make a difference. I think other factors will. And I think one thing we should keep in mind, President Trump changes his mind often, maybe in the same day, maybe in the same hour. And that's where we are today.
Right. Well, thank you so much for all of that. Of course, we'll be watching very closely. I appreciate your analysis.
Oh, great. Thank you very much.